Welcome back to Fresh Outlook. The polls show Americans in general leaning toward Republicans in the upcoming midterm elections, but oddly, on the state level, Democrats lead in those so-called purple states. The midterm elections in a president's second term are notoriously a time in which voters rebel against whoever is in the White House. Meanwhile, there are gubernatorial races, so how will it all shake out? To continue our discussion, we welcome back our distinguished panel. Let's take it one state at a time, if we can. In New Hampshire, you have Scott Brown, who was for a time a senator in Massachusetts and made the move, and he's running against Gene Sheenan. Now, how does that race shake out?
Well, that's a classic battle.
Why is it classic?
Well, it's classic because Brown will be trying to paint Shaheen as a clone of Obama, which is a typical tactic in a midterm election. And Shaheen is starting to paint Brown as a classic backer of Wall Street and big oil. And of course, she's also making the point that he's a carpetbagger. It'll be an interesting thing to see because he really does come from Massachusetts. He just went over the border into New Hampshire.
But in defense of Scott Brown, he's likable. He's got experience as a senator, and he just made the move to New Hampshire, and that has to count for something.
Right. He's likable. He has a good personality. I just don't know if he has enough going for him to actually win this election, though.
Scott Brown can win, but it is tough, and I think the carpetbagger issue is a huge deal. That's what beat Dick Lugar, because I didn't think he lived in Indiana, and that happens a lot. So is he one of us? I think maybe not, but if he has enough money, he can pull through. But it leans Democrat.
But watch it, it'll be a big one. Millions and millions of dollars are going to be spent on this one by both sides.
Definitely.
So it's going to be a big one.
What is the greatest attribute for Scott Brown now? I've been there, I've done that, I know how to be a senator. This person may not know as much as I know. Or
that plus the fact that he can project a personality. He's a good-looking guy. He projects as
that helps.
Yeah, he looks like a winner. He's just a winning guy.
He looks like a winner in many respects, but I don't know if he has enough substance to really cross the line.
Are you ready to predict this one?
No, this one will be a close one, but his basic campaign will be, do you want an Obama supporter in the Senate? And he's trying to paint Shaheen as a clone of Obama. And so
New Hampshire is always a state can go either way. Generally, it goes either way.
Yes.
I think Sterling's dumb, but with his personality, he's good looking, and he's just such a good speaker. I think it's going to come down to the money, and he'll have the money.
Yeah.
We also had a race in New York, and we're going to jump a little bit here. Democrat Andrew Cuomo defeated Democrat Zephyr Teachout. This was a surprise.
Very
he
bad
had a
news
mountain
for
of money, and she had some pennies, and she was able to get 35%. This surprised the heck out of me.
Very bad news for Cuomo because she came from the left again. She didn't win, of course, but she made a very respectable showing against a governor that had $40 million in his war chest, and she comes out with a third of the primary vote.
What does that say to national policy and
it's a statement
leaders?
For for former Senator Clinton, Secretary of State Clinton, to pay attention to, because she also comes out of New York, right? She was a senator from New York.
And another dynasty.
And it's another dynasty, and it's another attack from the left, and so it sort of should. She should listen to that vote and see whether she should not recalibrate some of her campaign tactics and strategies.
And you know, there's something about Andrew Cuomo's personality. He's not quite as good as his father. He just doesn't seem to connect as well as his father, and he speaks well, but sometimes I'm listening to him and it just doesn't work for me. I don't know what it is about him.
The New York general election has Andrew Cuomo, of course, Rob Astorino.
Right.
Who's made no secret that he wants to run for everything, and God bless him. And then we have also a Green Party candidate. Is that of significance in this race?
No, I don't think so. I think
No,
Cuomo,
I mean, look, I mean, he's going to win, but he may have trouble in the future.
Right,
for whatever
exactly. I mean,
he wants to
people looked at him as a potential presidential candidate down the road, and I think this election was a serious break on his ambitions. I mean, it doesn't eliminate him from anything.
Does he have to crush Rob Astorino to have any presidential aspirations?
No, but he has to win back the love of the left wing of his party. And how he does that, we'll see whether he manages to do it or not.
Let's go to Massachusetts, where we have Democrat Seth Moulton, we have Democrat John Tierney, and they will challenge GOP candidate, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Richard Teesey in November. This is a three-way race as well. How does this shake out?
Well, I think Moulton won the Democratic primary, and he did it by upsetting an incumbent, which is Tierney. I think that race turned more on local issues than national issues. That's sort of my take on it. Tierney had a problem. His wife is involved in some local scandal there. So I think this is sort of a typical race in which the incumbent wasn't paying attention, and it sort of went out from under him.
In an overwhelmingly Democratic state, and we saw this with the Senate candidate who ran against Scott Brown, sometimes they don't pay attention. They figure it's in the bag, and it could sneak up on you. Is this a possibility? Could it sneak up on him?
On who now, did you say?
We're talking about the Massachusetts Democratic candidate.
He's gone.
Yeah, no,
he got beat.
I mean, Tierney is gone. Tierney is gone. So it's Moulton versus the Republican challenger.
Right.
So Tierney just wasn't paying attention, which, as you point out, is something that often happens with an incumbent.
Eric
that's
Cantor. That's what happened to Eric Cantor.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they didn't think they had a race.
So it's a
beat.
warning sign. Pay attention to your constituency. Pay attention to what they're concerned about, and if you don't, particularly if it's a shoo-in, then for the voters, it's not a problem to vote for another of the same party.
But this is a hit to the Republicans because we had a much better chance going against the old guard guy that people are sick of, and now it's a fresh face, so it's a toss-up.
You bring up a very good point here. Let's pause for just a moment here. We have the whole Senate enough of the Senate in play that it could go Republican or Democrat. And as I mentioned at the top a moment ago, traditionally, the midterm election in the president's last term, he usually loses seats. Do you see a possibility of the Democrats losing the Senate as well this year?
They will lose the Senate.
Yeah, very
I think
big.
they will lose.
I'm not as certain as Dee Dee is, but yes, that's the real issue. Will the Democrats hold on to the Senate or not? And
well, we already have gridlock, so even if the Republicans take the Senate, we're going to have further gridlock.
Right, but this is interesting.
In other words, my question is, how does that change anything?
Right, well, if you're thinking presidentially, it's interesting because, of course, this will sort of set the stage for the presidential race. If the Republicans are not careful, they could be in a lose-lose situation whether they win the Senate or lose the Senate. If they lose the Senate and the Democrats keep their majority, then of course you have to consider, the Republicans have to consider, what kind of strategy should we be pursuing? Is our message the wrong message because we lost the Senate? If they win the Senate, then they have to think about what kind of programs can we project. We have to project the party as a party that can govern. If they can't do that, and again, it depends on the outcome of the Civil War within the Republican Party, then again, the Democrats come out better positioned for the general election.
Are we used to gridlock by now?
Well, I think, no, I don't think we are. I
now?
think people are very upset. That's why these incumbents are dropping like flies. So, to what you're saying, I think we will win the Senate, but it's a double-edged sword because when we win, then we get the blame.
Right.
If we don't win, it's all Democrats, so we're wanting to throw the bums out. So it's interesting.
Well,
I
don't think that it's going to happen that the Republicans hold the Senate. I think the Democrats are going to squeeze through on this. But I wrote a book on 9/11.
That's right.
One of the things that I predicted was that we were going to move to the center eventually. We still have the Tea Party, but they've been pushed to the side to a great extent. I predicted in the book that we will move to the center eventually, and I say that because people under 40 think differently today, and they are the voters of the future. And to Alan's point, I really think that as we move forward into the 2016 election, the GOP is in trouble because people want somebody they can relate to. And the people in the Republican Party and the party itself are not out there so that folks can relate to them. And that's their major problem.
Yeah, but Dr. Bart, here's a good point. Look, Obama was going to push immigration reform. He pulled it back because he knew he had to. Right now, he is not helpful to these senatorial candidates.
But Dee Dee, we have these comments from Republican and Tea Party candidates that are anti-gay, anti-immigration, anti-women in some cases. And I think a lot of people equate that with the Republicans, unfortunately, in those particular races. And they stick around. Now, that's not the future.
Yeah, but my point was that Obama now is not helpful. So the Republicans are going to run against, hey, you're an Obama clone. You're an Obama supporter. You support his policies. He's not helpful now.
Sure,
He's a problem.
One more big race. I want to talk about one more big race. This is in Massachusetts, where Democratic candidate Martha Coakley, famously, who went away for a week to Florida during her Senate campaign, and I kept saying to my wife actually at that time, you got to want this. If you don't want it, then why are you running? But I think she also thought it's a Democratic state, it's in the bag, and she lost to Scott Brown. She will be going against she'll be going against Charlie Baker, who is the Democrat there. So how does that one shake out?
Well, I think there it'll probably be just classic politics. The Democratic electorate, the majority of the electorate is Democratic. She'll probably win.
But will
I think
people
she's learned
forget
her
that?
lesson.
Will people forget that she went away in the heat of a campaign to go get some sunshine?
I mean, candidates make mistakes all the time, and it depends whether they make up for it, acknowledge their mistakes, and compensate for it.
She's presenting herself
well. She's presenting herself well.
Yeah, she's doing
and I think there's kind of a residual thinking. Remember the person who beat me, Mr. Scott Brown? He's not running in New Hampshire.
Good point.
And I'm still here. I still care about Massachusetts.
Good point.
I still
And
care about
to say
that.
this, but Baker's a bit forgettable in himself, so he's not the strongest candidate. I think she'll win that.
Okay,
The Democrat machine.
So just to review, you think the Republicans take the Senate?
Yes.
I think it's a toss-up.
You think
Absolute toss-up.
Well, Okay, you said the Republicans will probably do it, but you think it's a toss-up.
No, I really do think it's a toss-up. I really do. I don't think
because
one
not
could say
only
because
they have to get 50, they have to get 51.
Because it's highly volatile. You've got the economy, which is still an issue, but you've now got the possibility of war looming overseas, and how that plays out, how people see that. I think it really is a toss-up.
Well, Dr. Bart, why do the Democrats run away from what they've done? I mean, quite frankly, the unemployment rate is down. We have health care for millions of Americans that didn't have it before. We're out of Iraq, and it's still a mess, but we're not spending as much money as we are on these engagements overseas. Why is it they run from this, and why do they run from Obama?
Well, this election cycle is good for the Republican Party because the way it's set up with these elections, there's mostly conservative states in play. So that's why the Democrats have to be careful, and that's why they're not going down the road of Obamacare, which is quite positive. Many positive features that you've just enunciated are not something that the Democrats can talk about freely because it's a very favorable cycle to the GOP. And I still think they're not going to hold the Senate.
Professor, have they beaten back the Republicans now? Have the Republicans beaten back the Tea Party surge for the time being?
Absolutely not, because much of the Tea Party's strength comes in the House because of the gerrymandered districts. And so you will find that a lot of Tea Party folks are still in office, still have their agenda, still will fight for it. And they also have a national figure that champions them, and which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but that's Senator Ted Cruz. So I think with Ted Cruz leading the charge, so to speak, the Tea Partiers in the House are still very active and will still be heard from.
But if you have the support of the Tea Party, maybe the fringe Republican evangelicals, are you electable?
Well, you are electable
in
if
your
you're
state or district.
In a primary.
You are electable if you're in a gerrymandered district or in a primary. The real issue, which the Republican establishment has come to realize, is no, you can't win, or it's very difficult to win in a broader electorate.
This circles back to who will be the Republican candidate,
Exactly.
which we talked a little before, because
But
you have to find somebody in the middle, or at least to portray himself in the middle.
I agree with what Alan's saying, but I do think that the Tea Party is being pushed, and they're being pushed aside. They're being marginalized, and they will be marginalized ultimately.
I think this is all politics is local when it comes to Tea Party. In some areas they're very strong, in others the machine still is being able to beat them down. It depends what you're talking about.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about is immigration, which the president decided to kick down the can down the road, so it's not an issue in November. Wise choice, or?
Yes, it's raw politics. It's raw politics, and I think everybody recognizes it. The races, and we're talking about a very close Senate races, are all going to be decided. The close races will all be decided in so-called conservative states or Republican states. And so there the immigration issue does not play well, and Democrats do not want to be running on a platform where they have to talk about immigration. For those Democrats that are running in other states that are not the close races, they can talk about immigration as they wish.
Right. We all know the president's last 2 years are probably the least powerful. Everybody looks at him as a lame duck.
Right.
How can he, post-election, pull this off when most presidents pivot to foreign policy issues because that's all they really can handle in those last 2 years, because Congress doesn't want to do anything because there's an upcoming presidential election? Is immigration reform, the question is immigration reform possible?
Probably not, and that's why so many Latino groups are very upset, because they see another 2-year hiatus in over this whole issue.
Yeah, but I think the Latino population will get it. They'll understand what Obama did. The psychology of the day is not for him to put this out there now. And they will get that and understand that. They may not like the next 2 years, but that's the way it's going to be. But I think that what happens with Obama, he has 2 years to enhance his image and his presidency, just like Reagan did. His popularity, Reagan, was 37% 1 year before he left office. So I think Obama has some very good things he could do in the last 2 years.
All right, we're going to have to take a break. We thank you, Professor, for coming by and giving us your insight on the politics. When we come back, a look at the latest Apple and Samsung gadgets that will be connecting and entertaining us for some time to come. We'll be right back.